When you look at a map of India today, with all its states and union territories, it's easy to forget it wasn't always like that.
Not at all. It's really a tapestry, isn't it?
Hmm.
Woven from history, culture, and, well, a lot of political effort.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is just how much that internal map has actually changed, how it's evolved since independence.
Mm.
It reflects the sheer diversity right from the start.
Yeah, and I think it's crucial to remember as we start this deep dive just how complex things were administratively back in 1947.
Right.
You had the British-administered provinces, which people might know a bit about, but then you also had something like 565 princely states.
565. Wow.
Yeah, think about that. Hundreds of separate entities. They covered like 40% of the land and maybe 23% of the population.
That's huge.
And they weren't all the same. Some were massive, really influential, others tiny, each with its own history, its own level of autonomy.
So it wasn't just flipping a switch to create a unified India.
Definitely not.
The first challenge, that initial hurdle, must have been huge. How do you even start bringing all those different pieces together? It sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It was an immense task. And that's really the mission here,
Yeah.
to unpack those key phases, the main factors that shape the map we see today.
Okay.
We'll look at some surprising moments and try to make sense of what really drove these big changes.
All right, let's get into it then. So, that first big step, integrating the princely states. You always hear about Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. What was his role exactly, and who else was involved?
Well, Sardar Patel, the first deputy PM and home minister, he was absolutely central to this, pivotal.
Mm-hmm.
He, along with VP Menon, who was the secretary of the State Department, they really drove this integration process. It was, a mix of negotiation, persuasion, tailored to each state.
And the main tool was the instrument of accession. What did that actually involve for the rulers?
Exactly. The instrument of accession was the legal bit, the document the rulers signed. By signing, they basically agreed to hand over power to the Indian government for three main things: defense, external affairs, and communications.
And most signed up pretty quickly.
Remarkably, yes. Something like 562 states signed on fairly willingly before August 15th, 1947.
But not all of them. I seem to remember reading about a few states that were, well, more difficult.
You're right. There were definitely some tricky ones, notable exceptions that needed a more, let's say, assertive approach.
Like Junagadh.
Junagadh is a classic example.
Yeah.
The Nawab actually decided to accede to Pakistan,
Oh, right.
which you can imagine caused a huge outcry among the mostly Hindu population. So India intervened. There was a blockade. Indian forces moved in, and eventually a plebiscite in February of 48 overwhelmingly chose India.
Okay, so that was resolved fairly decisively. What about Hyderabad? That always seemed more complex.
Hyderabad was, yeah, definitely more complex. The Nizam, he initially wanted full independence.
Right, within India's borders.
Exactly, which the Indian government just couldn't accept. Negotiations failed, and with growing unrest inside Hyderabad, concerns about law and order, India launched Operation Polo in September 1948.
Operation Polo.
Yeah, and that led to Hyderabad's integration.
And then, of course, there's Kashmir. Still such a sensitive topic today.
Kashmir's situation, as you know, was tied directly to the invasion by Pakistan-backed forces in October 1947.
Right.
It was in response to that invasion that Maharaja Hari Singh signed the Instrument of Accession. That was October 26, 1947.
And that allowed Indian troops in.
Precisely, to defend the region. The accession itself was later formally ratified by Jammu and Kashmir's own Constituent Assembly.
I also read about privy purses. What were they? Some kind of financial deal?
Yeah, essentially, the privy purses were basically financial packages offered to the royal families.
Oh, okay.
As a way to sort of smooth the transition,
Yeah.
Get them to merge their states with India more willingly. A bit of pragmatism, maybe, providing some financial security to the former rulers to avoid drawn-out fights.
So, looking back, it really was an incredible feat of nation building. Mostly peaceful, but those exceptions really show the challenges involved.
Absolutely. A remarkable achievement, really, uniting such a diverse group of entities.
And it must have really strengthened the central government's hand in those early years.
Oh, definitely. It laid the groundwork for a unified nation. Although, those arrangements like the privy purses, they had their own later controversies. But the immediate result was a stronger center.
But the administrative structure that came right after in 1950, that wasn't the final form, was it?
No, not at all. That was always seen as temporary.
Right. The Constitution in 1950 set up that four-part classification. Part A, B, C, and D states. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So Part A states, there were 9 of them. These were mostly the old British governors' provinces. Think Assam, West Bengal, Madras.
The ones people were more familiar with.
Exactly. Yeah. Governed by a governor, appointed by the president, and they had elected legislatures. Pretty much the system carried over from British India. Their boundaries often followed existing lines, history, language, culture.
Okay. And Part B, how are they different?
Part B states, also 9, were the former princely states or groups of them,
Hmm.
like Hyderabad, J&K, Rajasthan.
Ah, the newly integrated ones.
Right. They were headed by a Raj Pramukh. This was usually a former ruler appointed by the president. But they also had elected legislatures, so kind of a hybrid system reflecting that transition.
Interesting. A different setup there. What about Part C?
Part C states, 10 of those.
Hmm.
These were the former chief commissioners' provinces and some of the smaller princely states.
Yeah.
Like Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, Korg,
Smaller units then.
generally, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were governed by a chief commissioner appointed by the president, so more direct central control there.
And finally, Part D.
Just one, right.
Just one. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Administered by a lieutenant governor. So you see, it was a real patchwork, reflecting how these different parts came into India. The patchwork, yeah. But like you said, transitional. Because it didn't really tackle that growing demand for states based on language, did it?
Exactly. That was the big underlying issue, this idea of linguistic reorganization. It wasn't new. It had roots going way back before independence.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Indian National Congress itself had used linguistic zones for its own organization back in, like, 1920. Leaders like Tilak and Gandhi had supported the idea of linguistic provinces.
So the idea was already there. And after 47, these movements just got stronger, especially in the South.
They really intensified. The existing states were often multilingual, you see, and those cultural differences just fuel the demand for something more coherent, linguistically.
Makes sense.
And we even had an early example, Odisha, formed back in 1936 based on the Odia language.
But the big flashpoint was the demand for a Telugu-speaking state, wasn't it, Andhra?
Absolutely. The demand for Andhra state carved it out of the old Madras presidency. It just gained huge momentum. And tragically, it led to the death of Padishura after his long fast.
That was in 1953.
Yes, 1953. And his death was a major turning point. It really forced the government's hand.
You can see the logic, though, can't you? Linguistic states could mean better governance, education in the local language.
Precisely. That was the argument. Better administration, better cultural recognition, and a chance for vernacular languages, often sidelined under British rule, to actually develop and flourish.
So with these strong feelings, the government had to respond. That led to the Dar Commission in 48.
Yes, the Dar Commission, or the Linguistic Provinces Commission, their job was specifically to look into how feasible, how desirable it was to reorganize states mainly based on language.
And what was their verdict? Did they say yes?
Actually, no. They were quite cautious. Their conclusion was that reorganizing states just on language wasn't really in the larger national interest at that point.
Really? Why not?
They recommended focusing more on things like geographical closeness, financial stability, administrative efficiency, potential for development. They specifically warned against making language the main thing.
That seems surprising, given how strong the movements were. What was the worry?
The big concern was national unity. Remember, this was right after partition. There was a real fear that creating states based purely on language could weaken the new nation, maybe even lead to more fragmentation.
Ah, okay. The fear of further division.
Exactly. But as you can imagine, that report didn't go down well with the people pushing hard for linguistic states.
No, I bet not. So what happened next? Did they just ignore the report?
Well, the pressure continued. So in December 1948, the Congress Party set up another committee, the JVP Committee.
GVP?
Yeah, Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and Pattabhi Stoudamire. Their job was to look at the issue again, given how unpopular the Dar report was.
And did they come to a different conclusion?
Initially, not really. They also kind of rejected language as the primary basis. They echoed those same concerns about unity, security, economic prosperity. But, and this is the shift, they did acknowledge what they call the insistent and overwhelming public feeling. They said, basically, as Democrats, they'd have to consider this strong public demand, but always, with limits to protect the bigger national interest.
So a slight softening, acknowledging the pressure, but still hesitant.
A slight softening, yeah.
Yeah.
Still prioritizing national unity above all.
But then Andhra Pradesh happened in 53.
Exactly. The formation of Andhra Pradesh, driven by that intense public demand and Srimalu's sacrifice, it really forced a major rethink. The government realized they couldn't just keep putting a lid on these powerful linguistic aspirations. It was a catalyst.
Which leads us directly to the States Reorganization Commission, the SRC. also called the Fazl Ali Commission, right? Late 1953. This feels like the real turning point.
It absolutely was a pivotal moment. This commission, led by Justice Fazl Ali, with Cam Panikar and Ajen Kunzru also on board, marked a really significant shift.
How so?
They broadly accepted language as one of the main bases for reorganization. But crucially, they rejected the idea of one language, one state as the only rule.
Okay. So language was important, but not the sole factor. What else did they consider?
Well, the absolute top priority was still the unity and security of India. That trumped everything.
Right.
They laid out four main factors for any reorganization. First, unity and security. Second, linguistic and cultural homogeneity. Third, financial, economic, and administrative viability, the practical side. And fourth, planning and promoting welfare, both for the state and the nation as a whole.
That sounds like a pretty balanced approach. What were their key recommendations then?
They were pretty sweeping. They recommended getting rid of that whole Part A, B, C, D system entirely.
Ah, simplifying things.
Yes, and creating 16 states and 3 centrally administered territories instead. They also said get rid of the Raj Pramuk's in the old Part B states, scrap the special agreements with former princely states, and end some of the central control under Article 371. This report really laid the blueprint.
The blueprint for the next big step. The States Reorganization Act of 1956. This is where the map really starts to look more familiar, isn't it?
Exactly. Passed in August 56, came into effect November 1st. It was the direct legislative result of those SRC recommendations.
And it formally killed the A, B, C, D categories.
Yep. Abolished them, established a unified system, just states and union territories. The 7th Constitutional Amendment Act was passed alongside it to give it all the legal weight needed.
And the main goal was redrawing boundaries, mostly along linguistic lines, for better administration.
That was the core idea, yes.
Well,
making things more efficient, more culturally coherent. The act also set up zonal councils advisory bodies to help states cooperate, and it sorted out things like high courts for the new states and adapting old laws.
so what did the map look like after November 1st, 1956? How many states and UTs?
It resulted in 14 states and 6 union territories.
Okay, can you run through some of the big changes?
Sure. Andhra Pradesh was formed by adding Telugu areas from Hyderabad state to the existing Andhra state. Assam and Bihar got smaller, losing some areas to West Bengal. Bombay state got much bigger. It took in Saurashtra, Kutch, Marathi areas like Berar and Nagpur, and Aurangabad.
Wow, Bombay became huge.
It did. Jammu and Kashmir stayed pretty much the same. Kerala was formed by merging Travancore Cochin with Malabar district and Kasaragod Taluk from Madras. Madhya Pradesh also grew, absorbing Madhya Bharat, Vindhya Pradesh, and Bhopal.
Okay.
Madras state lost areas to Kerala and Mysore, but it gained Kanyakumari. Mysore state expanded a lot, taking in Coorg and Canada areas from Madras, Bombay, and Hyderabad. Orissa didn't change. Punjab got bigger by adding Pepisu, the Patiala, and East Punjab States Union.
BSU, right?
Rajasthan also grew, adding Ajmer and parts of Bombay and Madhya Bharat. Uttar Pradesh stayed the same. West Bengal gained Purulia from Bihar.
And the union territories.
The 6 UTs were Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, the Lakadi, Minicoy, and Amindivi Islands, which later became Lakshadweep, Manipur, and Tripura. So yeah, a massive reshaping.
Huge changes. What was the immediate impact on people? Did it work?
For many, yes. It gave a real sense of identity and a political voice to linguistic communities. It fulfilled aspirations, which probably helped with national integration in the long run, ironically.
By meeting those demands.
Right. And it definitely streamlined administration, got rid of those confusing A, B, C, D categories in the Raj Pramuk's. Parliamentary seats were also readjusted.
But I guess it wasn't the end of the story. Did it solve everything?
Not quite. Some boundary disputes lingered. And in a way, by making language the key principle, it perhaps unintentionally opened the door for future demands based on other things: ethnicity, development, culture. The map wasn't set in stone.
Which brings us nicely to the period after 1956. The map kept changing, didn't it? Driven by some of those very factors.
It certainly did. The evolution continued. One of the first big ones was in 1960. Remember that huge Bombay state?
Yeah.
It was split into Maharashtra for Marathi speakers and Gujarat for Gujarati speakers. That was the result of really strong movements, the Samyukta Maharashtra and Mahagujarat movements.
Linguistic demands again.
Yes. Then in 1966, Punjab was divided. You got Punjab for Punjabi speakers and Haryana for Hindi speakers. This came out of the Punjabi Suba movement. Some hilly parts went to Himachal Pradesh, which was a UT then, and Chandigarh became a shared capital and a UT itself.
And the Northeast saw a lot of changes too, based more on tribal or ethnic identity.
Exactly. That was a major focus between the 60s and 80s. Nagaland was created in 1963 from parts of Assam. Then in 1972, a big reorganization. Manipur and Tripura became full states from UTs, and Meghalaya was carved out of Assam-Bakasi, Jaintia, and Garo Hills.
Right.
Later, in 1987, Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh also became states from UTs. And let's not forget, Sikkim joined as a state in 1975. It really shows the need to recognize diverse identities.
And then we jump forward to 2000, another batch of new states.
Yes, 3 new states in 2000. Chhattisgarh from Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand from Bihar, and Uttarakhand, initially called Uttaranchal, from Uttar Pradesh.
And the reasons there were more about.
Largely about regional imbalances. Feelings of economic neglect, being politically sidelined, distinct regional identities, often linked with tribal populations too.
And the most recent one?
That would be Telangana in 2014. Carved out of Andhra Pradesh after a very long, very determined political movement. That was driven by a mix of historical issues, socioeconomic grievances, and cultural factors unique to that region.
It's quite a list. It really shows how diverse the reasons for state creation became after 1956.
Absolutely. It wasn't just language anymore. Ethnicity, administration, development gaps all played a role. We can maybe summarize that post-56 list quickly.
Good idea.
Okay, so 1960, Maharashtra and Gujarat from Bombay language. 63, Nagaland from Assam, tribal identity. 66, Punjab and Haryana from Punjab language. 72, Meghalaya from Assam, tribal. Manipur and Tripura from UT's culture. 75, Sikkim joins. 87, Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh from UT's ethnic tribal. 2000, Chhattisgarh from MP, Jharkhand from Bihar, Uttarakhand from UP, regional imbalance identity. 2014, Telangana from Andhra Pradesh, multiple factors.
That's a great overview. Now, besides creating new states, there were also name changes for existing states, right? And some boundary tweaks even before 56.
Yeah, a few minor boundary things happened earlier, like Bilaspur merging with Himachal in 54, Chandorga with West Bengal in 55, and the 56 Act itself involved significant transfers, as we saw with Kerala, Mysore, Bombay getting bigger or smaller.
But after 56, the focus shifted more to name changes reflecting identity.
Exactly. While new states were the big story, name changes were also important symbolic acts. In 1969, Madras State became Tamil Nadu, a very clear assertion of Tamil identity. In 1973, Mysore State was renamed Karnataka, connecting to the Kannada language and regional history. Much later, 2007, Uttaranchal became Uttarakhand, reflecting its geography and culture. And in 2011, Orissa became Odisha, aligning with the Odia pronunciation.
So these names weren't just cosmetic changes, they mattered for identity.
They really did. It's part of that ongoing process of defining and asserting regional identities within India. Maybe a quick table for those two.
Perfect.
Old name, Madras State. New name, Tamil Nadu. Year, 1969. Reason, Tamil identity. Old. Mysore State. New. Karnataka. Year, 1973. Reason, Kannada language region. Old. Uttaranchal. New. Uttarakhand. Year, 2007. Reason, geography culture. Old. Orissa. New. Odisha. Year, 2011. Reason, Odia pronunciation.
Okay, it's really clear now that there are so many interwoven factors driving these changes. Can we dig a bit deeper into those underlying forces, politics, socioeconomic issues?
Definitely. Political aspirations are huge, often driven by regional parties. Think of the Akali Dal pushing for Punjab or the Telangana Rashtra Samiti for Telangana.
They mobilize people.
Exactly. They channel public feeling and put pressure on the central government. And the center's decisions are complex too, right? They have to think about stability, coalition politics, elections. It all feeds in.
Makes sense. And those socioeconomic gaps we mentioned, regional imbalances.
Absolutely key. When a region feels economically left behind, neglected in development, or that resources aren't shared fairly, that builds a strong case for separation.
Hoping a smaller state means more focus.
That's the hope. Better resource allocation, policies tailored to local needs, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Uttarakhand, those were largely driven by these kinds of economic and development concerns. Competition for resources is a big factor.
And throughout all this, language, culture, identity, they remain central, even after the big linguistic shakeup of 56.
Oh, fundamental. Language was key in 56, but afterwards, we see cultural and ethnic identities becoming really strong drivers, especially in the Northeast, as we discussed. There's this deep desire for recognition, for self-governance, to protect a unique culture or way of life. It's about collective identity in such a diverse country.
And it's fascinating how these big forces play out in actual historical events and grassroots movements.
It really is. Those movements, Samyukta Maharashtra, Mahagujarat, they show the power of language. The Punjabi Suba movement shows that complex mix of language and religious identity.
Uh,
The movements in the Northeast highlight ethnic assertion, sometimes involving insurgency, then negotiation. And the Telangana movement just shows the sheer persistence of regional grievances over decades.
and these movements involve real people, popular support, strong leadership.
Absolutely.
Right.
You see incredible popular participation and dedicated leadership driving these massive changes. It makes you realize the map isn't just lines drawn by officials.
No, it's dynamic. It reflects the people, their identities, their struggles, their aspirations. So as we wrap this up, we've really traced this incredible journey from integrating the princely states
Which was step one, hugely complex.
through that landmark linguistic reorganization in 1956,
The big shakeup.
and then all of the later state formations driven by this whole mix of factors we've discussed.
Exactly. India's internal map really is a living document, isn't it? A testament to the country's diversity and the evolving goals of its different communities and regions.
It's like a constant negotiation, balancing regional identity with national unity.
That's a great way to put it, a balancing act.
And the fact that we still hear calls for new states, Vidarbha, Gorkhaland, others, it suggests this story isn't over, right?
That's a crucial point. It's a reminder that this reshaping is ongoing. Aspirations for self-determination, for better governance, for recognition, these forces are still very much alive.
So maybe a final thought to leave our listeners with. How does this ongoing evolution of states, this constant redrawing, how does it actually reflect the changing priorities and challenges India faces now in the 21st century?
That's interesting.
And looking ahead, what might be the next big things influencing how India's internal lines might be redrawn? What new factors might come into play?
Yeah, what are the future drivers? Economic shifts, environmental pressures, digital divides. It's definitely complex and something to really ponder.